Hi, my name is Gloria Lee. I'm a Senior Director of Business Development with Neulion. I have the great pleasure of being here with Stacie Gray, who's the Chief Creative Officer at In Demand. So welcome.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm really glad to be here.
Can you talk about the beginning of your career, how you started in creative design and what made you decide to go on that path?
I was a communication design major at Parsons in New York City, and I really enjoyed all of my design classes, but particularly liked my advertising classes when you're combining copywriting and art direction into a total concept, and that's sort of how I started in advertising.
So do you have any advice for people who are kind of in the beginning of their career, general kind of do's or don'ts? Or
I think that maybe I was fortunate because I had a sense of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it wasn't hard for me to, make some career choices early on that put me, I think, on the right track. But I have seen with people that have interned for me over the years that sometimes parents now are pushing their kids to just take anything, take any job, and when you talk to people and you hear what their real interests are versus the job that they're taking, it's pretty wide. So I would say the first piece of advice I would give is try to hold out for what it is that you want.
What about kind of moving to where you are today? Did you also know at that point that you wanted to kind of be in the C-suite?
I don't think I even knew what C-suite meant, probably, at that point. I think it was just more blind ambition, really not to try to rule the world, but to just be really good at what I did and to keep pushing myself, and then a feeling that I deserved to be compensated and recognized for the level of contributions that I was making at any given time.
Right.
So I think it was really more about that for me. And when I first started, that agency I worked in was a fairly small agency. It was a startup. So there weren't really a lot of layers, and there wasn't a C-suite there.
Yeah.
And then, I've had a variety of work experiences, all in the same type of work, but I've consulted and freelanced. I have worked for startup cable networks, launching, a new TV network, getting it on the air. I've worked for the cable companies, helping them do marketing and branding and creative. And then I came to In Demand, which is like the everything rolled up in one, where we distribute content to all the cable companies. So, and I run an in-house creative services and marketing group here. And I think that's really it. I just continued to see opportunities along the way to take on more, and I became interested in more. Like maybe I get a little bored. I don't want to just do the same thing, and I want to push myself, to sort of the next level, more really for my own satisfaction.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have a team of folks. Can you talk a little bit more about your leadership style and kind of what's helped you develop that over the years?
I think I never really learned much about management when I look back. I don't think I really started out as a very good manager. I was very intimidated to manage people. I always knew sort of the outcomes that I wanted from things, but I found it intimidating, especially when I was younger, to lead, confidently lead, and I would often just become a little frustrated with people and not really know how to get them to kind of do what I needed. And that was, maybe everyone goes through that at that point in their career, but I remember that being very, at one point, like feeling very frustrated about how to have like really good working relationships and to hire the right people. That was also another thing that you kind of learn of trial and error over time. I think it really wasn't until like a lot later in my career where I was able to focus more on management, because I was able to kind of pull myself out of the overwhelmingness of the day-to-day doing, and then at that next level, part of what you have to do is lead more people, so more of your time gets spent on that. I think some workshops and other things I did gave me a new perspective, really, to recognize that it's very important to have people, it's very important to have diversity, and I don't necessarily mean even cultural diversity, but I mean different working styles and different skill sets.
Yeah.
That's what really makes a great team. You want to have people that you can rely on for different kinds of things, and maybe everyone isn't just like you, but that doesn't, you have to kind of meet people where they're at,
Right.
and be more of an empathetic
Yeah.
leader. And so that really changed a lot for me in terms of how I lead. And I would say hands-off, hands-on when I need to be. I mean, I believe like I don't need to interfere with people's work just to make myself or make them think that I am doing something.
Yeah.
I would rather give additive leadership, when I really have something to add, instead of just making people's work more difficult by interfering with it, which I think some managers can do.
So in addition to your all of the professional accomplishments, you've also got your family, you've got your husband and your kids, and your dog as well. So can you talk about that piece and how you've kind of been able to navigate work life as well through your career?
Yeah, well, I would say in the beginning, when I first had my son, I lost my job 2 weeks before I had him. So that was not exactly what I had planned in terms of work-life balance. But it ended up really working out well, because I ended up being able to freelance and take a lot more time off to be home, at least part of the time, than I would have if I had continued with the job that I had, which was for a startup, which was a very demanding job. But once he was about 1.5 years, a former client of mine from when I was in advertising called me and told me about the job here. He was coming over as head of marketing, and he wanted me to come over as head of creative. And so I decided it was a good time to step back into a full-time job and back into sort of my career track. And I took the job, and they wanted to just relaunch the whole company, the whole brand in like 3 months.
Yeah.
It was a great opportunity, but it was extremely stressful and a lot of work. And I enjoyed the work, and I was very excited about it, but it definitely was traumatic from a work-life balance standpoint. I mean, I would say the thing that I've learned is that you're not always going to have work-life balance.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you really are fortunate to choose a job that just that has a more structured schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in any kind of service business, anything on deadlines, people that have to do a lot of travel because they're in sales and things like that, it's hard. It's hard to find it it's hard to find the balance. I will tell you one thing that did make a difference to me was when I moved further away from the office and had to commute. What it taught me was that I enforced a structure of a schedule on myself.
Yeah.
So I get on a train and I'm here by a certain time, and I walk out the door at a certain time to get on the train because I need to be home. And it made me realize that a lot of times the way that we work is as much to do with our own kind of lack of discipline for work-life balance. It's not always a company that's imposing it upon us. So you have to do your part too. And I also noticed that I've always worked for men, and for the most part they all had kids, and I watched them walk out the door whenever they needed to, whenever they wanted to. They never asked permission. They never said where they, it was like, and I thought, like, well, why are all of us women here not doing the same?
Yeah.
And I realized you have to give yourself permission.
Right.
We're looking for permission. We're looking for someone to say it's okay.
Yeah.
And really, the person that has to say it's okay is yourself.
Yeah.
Within the limits of what your work culture is like.
Yeah. That's really good advice.
But also working in the entertainment industry, working in the cable television industry, I think we have a good industry. It's a little more laid back in terms of corporate cultures. I mean, it still feels corporate. It's not complete like bring your dog to work, situation. Right. But I think we are lucky. We're in a good industry that's progressively minded and does support work-life balance.
We were talking earlier about managing and leading people. Can you talk about, do you have advice for people who are new managers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with learning how to hire the right people, and that is tricky, and I've learned that the hard way. I tended earlier in my career, because I was running a creative group, to choose people that were really dynamic in their interviews, like really funny and had these big personalities. And what I came to find, and it happened more than once, is that people that come with these big personalities, if they're like that in an interview, which is probably your most what's the word I'm trying to think of? You know, in an interview would be most like
game time.
You'd really be like doing your best to be as professional as possible, right? So if you're already like kind of woo in an interview, like when you actually have people like that working for you, they're a little crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I would say, that was the one thing I learned, which is you have to really think about fit, and don't be distracted by don't be lured in by big personalities. Sometimes it can be very disruptive to a team, especially if you're a new manager building a team. You have to sort of think like, will this person work well with that person? And so I would say first, make sure you hire good people that have good work ethic, and then you don't want to compete with them. We've talked about this, right? Your job is to lead them and to help teach them, and you have to have the patience. I mean, I think when you onboard a new person, also I've learned this, that it sometimes can take like 3 months for them to really like get their footing, and you have to know that going in, and you have to be patient. You have to be willing to invest and take the time to train them, even though it's like work on top of your work. It will pay off for you.
Some folks talk about the value of networking and how that plays a role in their careers. Can you talk about that piece a little bit, and how it's been helpful? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of my career moves have been a direct result of networking, and I think when I was younger, I mean, it wasn't like networking wasn't, again, sort of a thing like it is now, but you did it naturally. I think I've always tried to put myself out there. I've attended industry conferences. Working on the agency side, we would certainly take our clients out and spend time with them, and I made relationships, with my clients from the different companies that we worked with, and those relationships, you have to keep the relationships up over time, keeping in touch with people, and then generally all of those relationships in some way or another have led to a call at some point saying like, hey, can you help me with this, whether it was freelance or whether it was in my next job. So that was very helpful. And then as I was at this job for a longer period of time, so that's kind of a different scenario, so it becomes a little more challenging to continue to grow your network when you're in the same job for a company for a long time, depending on what your role is. So I recognized that I was feeling a little isolated and didn't feel like I was meeting enough new people. I already know a lot of people in the industry, but I didn't feel I was really growing my network. So that's when I decided to get involved with women in cable and telecommunications, and that was really a conduit to, meeting a bazillion more people, and actually getting much more comfortable with networking. And leading in an organization that's committees, and working with people that are not that normally you work with, and it's been that I would highly recommend for people to get out of your comfort zone, join some kind of a professional organization, but then you have to actually participate, because for many years I had been a member of other organizations, and I never went to one thing that they did, and so then it's sort of meaningless. It's sort of you get out what you put in. Right.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of which.
Yeah.
We met.
Right. And we help each other.
What's kind of what's on the horizon for you in terms of your career? Where do you see yourself kind of in the future?
It's an interesting question, because I've already had a fairly long career, and I feel like attained a high, at least title. So it's an interesting place to sort of find yourself in your career, where you say, gosh, I really set out, I really accomplished everything that I set out to do. And now what? So I don't know if I have the answer, but I think probably a lot of people at my life and career stage are faced with a similar dilemma. So you have to, I mean, one thing I've done is I've joined more boards. I'm on several boards, and I like to get involved, in other kinds of things, being able to apply my experience, leadership, to help other organizations, so you kind of can grow in that way. And certainly, to continue to provide leadership within my own company. I've gotten a lot more involved over the last several years with building up the internal and corporate culture. So there's always sort of like new areas that you can delve into. And my motto is always say yes. If someone asks you to do something, say yes.
Yeah.
Because you never know, where it's going to lead, and who you're going to meet.
Yep.
And usually it's somebody interesting or someplace interesting. So I think that's, at this point, I am feeling like open to the possibilities,
that's
but in a more relaxed way.
Yeah.
I've paid a lot of dues.
Yeah,
I've worked
absolutely.
super hard. I've thrown myself into, big projects that I didn't really have the experience to do, but I said yes and I did them. And I think also that's another thing that probably contributed to my success is that I always said yes to things and then was able to do a good job. And I think that people that worked with me and that I worked for recognized that I was capable of more.
Do you have
and
any
they supported
other
that.
kind of like secrets to your success, kind of ideas or concepts in addition to the say yes to opportunities? And
I think I'm a fairly calm person, and so I think maybe that is another, like, not to be so super stressed out all the time, and try to, I think it's a Jesse Jackson that said this, I don't know, it always stuck with me, like, keep your eyes on the prize. That's how I do things. I'm very strategic. I know what I want, or have like a glimmer of something ahead, and then I just try to try to stay focused and make that happen. But I've also learned that life is a long road, and you have to have patience. Sometimes things take a lot longer to come together than you would like. But if you have perseverance and you have patience and you stay focused on the end game of what you're trying to do, and you kind of build your path strategically, it will happen. This was a hard thing too. Learn to be happy where you are. And I think that's a trap that people fall into. I think you sometimes fall into it. I never, barely ever gave myself a chance to feel good about anything that I ever accomplished in my career, because I was already thinking about, what is the next thing I have to do, and the next thing I want. And that's a little bit of a trap. It's like a never-ending cycle. And I think what I've learned from being in one job for a longer period of time is that you have to learn to enjoy and feel good about where you are, because you're not going to get a promotion, every year. It doesn't really work like that. So you might sit at it like a director level for 5-6 years. You can't beat yourself up every single day about that. And I see people doing that all the time. So celebrate your accomplishments. Remember to feel good about where you are, wherever that is, and then to have your long-term goals that you're working towards.
Well, thank you so much, Stacie, for all of your advice about so many different aspects of career. We really appreciate it. I think I've actually learned a ton more about you. So thanks, and I hope it's as helpful for everyone who sees it online as it